You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday, 5th of February 2014. Couple who trafficked deaf girl from Pakistan and forced her to work as servant have sentences increased. Royal Navy saves lives of 6 French fishermen. Benefits cheats living abroad claim millions for dead relatives as part of £84 million scam, new figures reveal. Greek deposits of €60 billion in Switzerland. Hollande gives up on controversial family law. Italy, rat fur found in Chinese-made cashmere coats. Austin Davis, who talks about the origins of insurance. Australia has hot new fleet of bright orange lifeboats. Australia turn-back policy will stop the boats, says People Smuggler. Report, more than 75,000 foreign nationals fight in Syria. China's banks could trigger global meltdown. Thought for the day, hatched and catched. And finally, anti-gay beer for Putin courtesy of the Scots. UK news. A couple who trafficked a deaf girl from Pakistan and forced her to work as a servant have sentences increased. Ilyas Ashar, 84, and Talat Ashar, 68, kept the girl, believed to be aged between 10 and 12, when she came to Britain in 2000, in a cellar in their Salford home, where she was forced to do unpaid work as well as cook and clean for the couple. She was also subjected to nearly a decade of sexual abuse at the hands of Ilyas Ashar. He was found guilty of trafficking the orphaned youngster from Pakistan and repeatedly raping her and was jailed for 13 years. His wife, Talat Ashar, 68, was found guilty of trafficking and jailed for 5 years. Today, Ilyat and Talat Ashar have had their jail terms raised to 15 and 6 years respectively. The couple of Cromwell Road, Eccles, were also convicted of benefit fraud relating to the girl who couldn't speak when she arrived in from Lahore. The pair denied the offences but were found guilty after a retrial in which the victim gave evidence using the sign language she had been taught after her life of servitude was discovered. World date, along with the benefit fraud, this is just the tip of the iceberg in these communities. They bring their so-called culture with them. Royal Navy saves lives of 6 French fishermen. French and British seamen have shown little love for each other over the years, but at the weekend the British Royal Navy showed differences can be put aside when it saved the lives of 6 Breton sailors who were trapped in a sinking trawler in stormy seas. World date, trawling in our seas, I presume. Benefits cheats living abroad claim millions for dead relatives as part of £84 million scam, new figures revealed. Benefit fraud committed abroad cost the taxpayer an estimated £84 million in 2012-2013, a rise of 90% in the last 2 years, new figures suggest. According to the Department for Work and Pensions, abroad fraud is now the 3rd largest type of fraud, with investigators looking into 7,296 cases of suspected fraud abroad in 2013. Pension credit made up the majority of the fraudulently claimed money at £52 million, while £19 million was claimed for housing benefit and a further £12 million claimed for income support. Investigators have suggested a number of those investigated had been receiving the benefits from Britain for family members who had died. The government is planning to increase the use of life certificates this year to stop fraudsters continuing to claim benefits where the claimant has died. European news. Greek deposits of €60 billion in Switzerland. The deposits of Greek citizens in Swiss banks amount to €60 billion, as Greek Reporter website writes, quoting the economist Gabriel Zucman. The French professor of the London School of Economics and researcher at a University of California, Berkeley, published his book, The Missing Wealth of Nations, that refers to the transport of capital in tax havens. Zucman suggests that Greece should collaborate with powerful European countries such as Germany and Italy to force Switzerland to abandon the policy of banking secrecy. The Economist, using data from the Swiss National Bank, revealed that the Greek deposits in Switzerland amount to €60 billion, while German deposits reached €200 billion. This data shows that the total foreign wealth transported in Switzerland is reaching €1.8 trillion. Following Zucman's allegations, the Greek government is trying to uncover the secret accounts and deposits. The agreement between Greece and Switzerland regarding the taxation of hidden accounts owned by Greeks is expected to be finalised in the next months. Greek Deputy Finance Minister George Mavroganis recently visited Switzerland in order to reach an agreement with the Swiss government. World at 8. Although I am in favour of private citizens being allowed their savings, if they have obtained these enormous amounts from not paying their dues to their state or country, then they should be forfeit. The poor have to pay, therefore the rich should do also. Hollande gives up on controversial family law. A draft family law has been postponed indefinitely. The official reason cited is an excessively tight agenda, but the U-turn of the French government is a victory for all opponents of President François Hollande's family policies. And in particular for Manif pour tous, Protest for All, the association which has promoted over the past few months demonstrations against same-sex marriage and which promoted recently protests against assisted fertility treatments for lesbian couples and surrogate motherhood. Work to prepare the text will continue, the government said, but the draft law will not be presented in 2014. It should instead have been discussed by the Council of Ministers in April and then debated in Parliament in the second half of the year. Meanwhile, the government called on the National Ethics Committee to examine this draft measure. The committee will announce results after European elections. It is a victory because the draft law went against the interest of children and family, said the president of Manif pour tous, Ludivine de la Rochère. Tens of thousands of people had taken part in a demonstration Sunday called by the Conservative movement. Many families, pensioners and religious demonstrators, including Muslims, participated in the event. Manif pour tous received the ironic congratulations of far-left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon. The left is repudiated, said the leader of Front de Gauche, calling for elections inflicting on government lists severe punishment. One of the reform's main measures provided for the formal recognition of stepfathers and stepmothers, but the key issue concerned the potential extension of the right to assisted fertility treatments to lesbian couples, a measure like surrogate motherhood which was actually not included in the draft law. But the issue is promoted by Family Minister Dominique Bertinotti and part of the Socialists and strongly divides the majority. The rift was recognised on Monday morning by Interior Minister Manuel Valls, who, in order to stifle the controversy, announced that the government would have rejected any potential amendment on the two controversial issues. World at 8. Of course the Muslims cooperated, as they will occupy most of France one day, and they're notably anti-gay and pro-marriage. Italy, rat fur found in Chinese-made cashmere coats. Over 1 million fake clothing items seized. Italian police have found rat fur in fake cashmere coats made by Chinese textile workers. Police from Livorno and Rome seized more than 1 million counterfeit clothing items made by 5 Chinese-run firms in Rome and distributed by a wholesaler near Florence over the last few days, judicial sources said Monday. The allegedly cashmere items were found to be a mixture of acrylic, viscose and fur from rats and other animals, police said. Police, who also found bogus merino lamb, silk and pashmina apparel after a year-long probe, cautioned 14 Chinese-born people for fraud. World at 8. I think you all know what I could say here. Poor little ratties. God only knows what else went in, perhaps even Chinese pubic hair. I now hand you over to Austin, who talks today about insurance and its origins.
Insurance, that is to say home insurance, car insurance and the like, ostensibly has its origins in the wake of the Great Fire of London, when the burghers of our fine if somewhat singed capital got together to decide that, on balance, they would probably prefer that the 1666 fire remain a one-off rather than something to be repeated on an annual or even ad hoc basis. Basic fire prevention procedures were put into place, therefore, and it was made compulsory for every business and household to keep 2 leather buckets, water for the carrying of, and a ladder, getting the hell out of it for the purpose of. Training was also provided so as to expedite the collection of said water in the aforementioned buckets and the transportation of the by now full buckets to the source of any fire requiring to be extinguished. So, as well as facilitating the invention of insurance, the Great Fire of London seems to have been responsible for the birth of elfin safety, and for spawning countless self-important, self-righteous, big-boned and pointless bints of dubious sexuality, all clutching equally pointless NVQ qualifications to inflict on poor schmucks who actually believe they really are worth something. But I digress, so back to that exciting and totally absorbing subject of insurance. The concept was the brainchild of one Nicholas Barban, son of a fire and brimstone clergyman and one-time member of Cromwell's Parliament, the Reverend Isaac Praise God Barebone. Poor Nicholas grew up with the name of "Hath Christ not died for thee, thou wouldst be damned, Barebone," which rather puts into a semblance of context the torment suffered by a child growing up in the Birmingham of the 1950s and bearing the name Austin. It's hardly surprising the poor sod changed it. Anyway, young Nicholas managed to amass quite a fortune in the wake of the Great Fire, and became concerned that a careless barbecue on a sultry summer evening could mark the end of it all, unless he came up with something. So he did. He established the insurance office. To protect the houses and other buildings it was insuring, the insurance office formed actual firefighting teams. They were issued with equipment and identifying badges, and their job was solely to put out fires in or on the buildings they insured. Other insurance companies followed. They had names like the Friendly Society and the Hand in Hand, and they also employed their own fire departments. Nicholas Barban was not only the founder of the first recognisable insurance company, he was the founder of the first insurance company to lose the plot, in that his fire team would cheerfully watch a building burn to the ground if it was insured by a rival company. So he probably scored another first by inventing the phrase, "It's not my job," and hasn't that one endured? But, dear listener, I'm only teasing you, because insurance companies came into being long before the Great Fire of London, and long before London for that matter. Our northern ancestors survived the ravages of winter by learning to preserve and store the food that would sustain them until intemperate weather passed. So our prehistoric forefathers took to fattening up a pig through the spring and summer, that they might enjoy a nice bit of crackling to their comfort when the nights grew cold and long. And who doesn't? If the pig died or was lost, however, the consequences were more serious than merely having to forsake a nibble in the midnight. It could mean starvation and a death of the entire family. Responding to such an ever-imminent threat, villagers got together in cooperatives and established a central fund or resource, so that if any of their number suffered misfortune, such as losing a pig, a replacement could be obtained and the family saved. Friendly societies indeed. And the very concept of a friendly society is that everyone invests a like amount in order that he will be eligible to receive a like benefit. For sure there will be those who are luckier than others, and that generally translates into more competent, and the opposite will always apply, the principle being that the fortunate should take some sort of responsibility for the less fortunate. We can call it Christianity, we can call it socialism, we can call it humanity. We can call it Eric the Aardvark if we wish, just so long as we embrace it. Contrast that, if you will, contrast that concept and that principle with the grubby entities we've allowed insurance companies to mutate into, tools for the unscrupulous, grasping banksters to separate the vulnerable and underprivileged from what little they have, in return for, all too often, absolutely nothing. Contrast that, if you will, with the likes of Direct Line. Other rip-off merchants are available, and their ilk, who seek to cream off the low-risk driver and householder to the detriment of everyone else. It doesn't work. Eliminate the cheapest, lowest or easiest 10% of anything, and the remaining 90% immediately becomes dearer, higher or more difficult as a consequence. Eliminate the cheapest, lowest or easiest 90%, and you don't just marginalise the remaining 10%, you starve them to death. They will not survive the winter. The definition of a friendly society as a mutual organisation for the benefit and protection of the whole body has been corrupted by the culture and profit and exploitation that is capitalism. It is completely incompatible with Christianity, with socialism and with humanism, as it is absolutely abhorrent to Eric the Aardvark, who, like me, considers himself an aspiring Christian, socialist and nationalist. It must be redefined. Austin Davis, World at 8, Pete Seeger's Hammerworks.
Well, Austin, I certainly never knew those facts. Great investigation and thank you. World News. Australia has a hot new fleet of bright orange lifeboats. What awaits asylum seekers trying to get to Australia on dodgy wooden smuggling boats? An air-conditioned 90-seat lifeboat and an armed escort back to Indonesia is what? The fully enclosed and submersible 8 by 5 metre by 3 by 2 metre survival capsule, fitted with safety belts, navigational equipment, life jackets, food, water and an inboard diesel motor, came ashore in remote Sikpa in West Java on the afternoon of January the 15th. Prime Minister Tony Abbott today described the pictures of the lifeboat aground in Indonesia as rather interesting. Indonesian naval officer Edi Sukendi, based in Ujung Genten, the closest point between Indonesia and Australia, got word from a forest ranger that an unusual vessel had crash landed and disgorged an estimated 60 asylum seekers, who immediately scattered into the jungle. Sukendi, a naval operational with no boat of his own, asked local fishermen to take him up to the coast to Sikpu to investigate. They found an orange capsule jammed on a coral reef within wading distance of shore and approached it cautiously. Prime Minister Abbott's turn-back policy has caused intense heat at the highest diplomatic levels between Indonesia and Australia. Immigration Minister Scott Morrison's official office said in March last year 68% of people registered with the UNHCR in Indonesia were failing to do follow-up interviews and were instead opting to attempt to enter Australia illegally by boat. By December last year that rate had dropped to 9%. When asylum seekers are picked up, they are fed and photographed, then ordered into the lifeboat. If they refuse to enter the capsule, they are shoved inside and given documents stating they were not permitted to enter Australian waters. World at 8. You see, Australia, although huge, is an island as well. We should have started this years ago with the input through France from the Middle East and Africa. Australia turn-back policy will stop the boat, says People Smuggler. A convicted people smuggler believes the Abbott government's hardline policy of turning back the boats is working as a deterrent for both people smugglers and those seeking passage by boat to Australia. The Afghan nationals said people smugglers and their clients were being put off by the prospect of being turned back at sea by the Royal Australian Navy. Asked if he believed the Abbott government's controversial policy of turning back the boats would work, Amiria replied, "Of course it'll work, it is working. It'll stop the boats from Indonesia to Australia," he said. Report: more than 75,000 foreign nationals fight in Syria. Disturbing statistics have surfaced from Syria Sunday. Over 75,000 foreign nationals have been fighting in the Syrian civil war, according to a local website. The majority are from majority Muslim countries or regions where foreign nationals have been stirred to join by government forces, national cultural ideologies and religious fervour. According to the site, 14,000 hail from Chechnya, 12,000 from Saudi Arabia, 11,000 from Iraq, 5,600 from Turkey, 4,400 from Libya, 4,000 from Tunisia, 1,900 from Pakistan, 1,600 from Yemen and 1,200 from Afghanistan. Statistics show that Israel may be caught up in the effect the foreign nationals who are being trained to bring terror home with them could have on the Middle East. Among Israel's neighbours, 9,000 Lebanese, 2,600 Egyptians and 2,400 Jordanians have joined the war, as have at least 5,000 Palestinian Arabs. Among Europeans, 750 Russian nationals, 660 Germans and 450 French citizens have reportedly joined the fight. World at 8. Don't allow them back into these countries and deport their relations to be with them as well. That is what mercenaries are for, expendable warriors. China's banks could trigger global meltdown. The growing problems in the Chinese banking system could spill over into a wider financial crisis, one of the most respected analysts of China's lenders has warned. Charlene Xu, a former senior analyst at Fitch in Beijing and now the head of Asian research at Autonomous Research, said the rapid expansion of foreign currency borrowing could mean a crisis in China's financial system was becoming a bigger risk for international banks. Ms Chu has been warning since 2009 about the growth of a shadow banking system in China that has helped fuel the credit expansion seen in the country in the wake of the Western financial crisis. However, fears are growing that the build-up of foreign borrowing by the Chinese, particularly in US dollars, is creating an even greater build-up of risk than that seen before the crisis of 2008. Figures published by the Bank for International Settlement in October showed foreign currency loans booked in China, as well as cross-border borrowing by Chinese companies, has reached $880 billion as of March 2013, up from $270 billion in 2009. Analysts say this figure is now likely to exceed $1 trillion and is continuing to grow, raising the prospect of the potentially dangerous vulnerability of the Chinese financial system to a rising dollar. World at 8, I just hope we haven't sold too much of our infrastructure to China. If so, we'll have the double whammy of a failed euro and a very sick tiger. Thought for the day: birth rates and education, alias hatched and catched. Ah, children, those patter of tiny feet, only when they reach the stage of pattering they're not exactly tiny. There's no such thing as perfect parents, even if we could get two of them at the same time in this country, and certainly there is no such thing as a perfect child. In our family there was a saying that there was only one perfect person who came into this world and we don't want to meet his fate, and I know you can guess who I am referring to. Now, birth rates in this country are soaring through the roof. I don't mean by that our or my tribe's birth rates, but apparently the Poles are getting the media flack now for overproducing their amount of babies when they move to the UK. Oh crikey, and we've been saying that about the Muslim mothers for the last 3 decades, and only recently has that been in the public eye. So the Poles are baby factories. Well, they always have been, haven't they? Like the Muslims, no careers, no single life, and no getting drunk every Friday or Saturday to either get laid or have a Muslim sex gang after you. Early marriage, sinking babies and get on with it. I married at just 16, my first husband was 22, so although I applaud marriage, I was a bit young for my age, and not pregnant, I hasten to add. But marriage is a fine thing. I should know, I'm on my 3rd. But to all the young English girls who are not pursuing careers, I say settle down if you can afford it, bless you. When I win the lottery in the millions, no less, I will form a charity which supplies cheap mortgages to young couples of my tribe so they can set up homes and have the children they usually want but cannot have, as this country only funds foreigners when it comes to family life, and we do that to the death. You may hold me to this when I win the Euro lottery in the shape of many, many, many millions. But apparently the Polish mothers who migrated here after 2004 have an average of 2.13 children compared with the 1.30 level in Poland. Where do they get the 0.13 and 0.30 kids from? Surprise, surprise, the Romanian women have done even better. Not coming here to work, of course, but to produce on our NHS 2.93 kids compared to the 1.25 back in Romania. The agency who has done the report has also added unnecessarily that our living conditions and benefits might have aided that number and might have been underused. Of course, it is the promise of having free and constant medical treatment throughout your pregnancy, free birth, free maternity leaves or medical benefits, and then free nursery schools leading to free education, leading to free university, and then well-paid jobs which should go to the children which we should be having, not the Poles, Romanians or others. Talking of others at the end of this article, in fact the last 2 lines is a small sentence which says it all. Women from Libya and Algeria had amongst the highest birth rates at 5.58 and 4.3 respectively. Suffice to say, Muslim ethnics. Every time I see a Muslim woman, either headscarfed, veiled or burqa'd, she always has a pushchair plus 1 or 2 holding on, and she's still young enough usually to produce at least 3 more for us to assimilate, or rather not. The same goes for the Somali mothers. In fact, most of the foreigners I see have young children with them, whereas at the same age bracket in our tribes have the women working to provide salaries which they cannot stop because they would be homeless. Even more so now that the private landlords are mainly of the ethnic variety and really couldn't care about how their rents are obtained. now that the local councils don't bother to house our own young white couples. It is dog eat dog out there now, and it's not going to get any better until some legislation somewhere makes it difficult not only for people to come here but to start massive families when they do. It seems strange to me that a country can encourage genocide for its own people whilst discouraging it for other races who have left their own places of birth ostensibly to reproduce their own kind in our country. This brings us to education and the bugbear of Michael Gove. Gove was my MP for Camberley, where I live there, and he was most helpful over the death of my mother and the ensuing investigations, so I have some time for Mr Gove. I have to speak as I find. He is trying desperately to bring back the old style schooling which existed in the 1950s and 60s. That is an education system of choice within certain boundaries. The poor, as it is said, will always be with us, so why redo a perfectly good educational system to suit the have-nots when the existing systems that were in place didn't do too bad a job? The whole restructure of our education has taken place mainly under the Labour or Marxist ethos, and in fact if most of the Labour MPs hadn't sent their kids to public and private schools they would have shut them down as well. So let's not grab our clogs and ferrets immediately. I've spoken many times over the choices that were in place, but first of all, and most important of all, if someone wanted to learn and was bright, there were the systems in place 50 years ago to do just that. It wasn't easy, but it could be done, even if your parents were not wealthy, or in fact if they were very poor. Nowadays, even taking into account that many of our inner city schools are not white anymore, and certainly not English speaking, and I'm talking about the teachers as well, what actual choices are left even if a child wants to learn and is not in the private or public school systems? None really. There will always be the Chinese mums who virtually bully their offspring into achieving in any system, the Muslims who ignore the girls but the boys can go to madrasas, and other ethnic majorities who now flood the country with their children. It is them that the present educational systems favour, not mine nor yours. Why do you think the establishment are trying to get children as young as 2 into schools? Private schools have usually had small preschool entrance, but 2 is very young. But there is a method. It means that a 2-year-old will not be at home with his or her mother learning from her. It'll mean mummy is out working and baby is virtually in a communist collective of kids, all learning how to be politically correct at a very early age, and believe me, diversity and racism will play a large part. Absolutely ghastly. Michael Gove is right in trying to bring discipline to the school marketplace. I can only speak from experience of being at one time able to pay public school fees and then later not. My daughter, whose stepfather died, got a scholarship to her existing private school and stayed. My eldest son had to move from a large public school back to the local comprehensive, and that move marked him for life. He moved from a highly disciplined environment to a lax and lazy one. Most of the teachers at the comp were women and not up to the mark. He went from having 2 hours homework supervised every night at 14 years to absolutely none. I asked the head teacher, as he was called, why these boys had no homework at all, and he said that the women teachers would not either supervise homework or mark it, but they would start homework when they chose their CSEs. I paid extra for my son to take the old and unavailable GCEs, but the homework involved was pathetic. My youngest son, who would have benefited from private education, went through the state system, and we came up against the homework problem or lack of it throughout. That is why I chose the paying schools when I could. It wasn't the so-called snobby angle. In fact, I've met more reverse snobbery from comprehensive ex-pupils than public or private ones. It was the method of imposing the work ethic on a child at an early age. You work, you get. You don't get. And that is true nowadays more than ever. Most of these kids in the state system don't know how to work away from that school until much later in their teens, if ever. Homework should start when you're almost starting at school. I did. Even when I was 8 I had homework every night. It never did me any harm, whatever. I did read a most disgusting item today, and it concerned the Oratory Boys' School in Woodcote, Oxfordshire. Suffice to say they do not let us know the name or nationality of the boy A who beat another boy, stoned and beat birds to death and skinned live cats. The whistleblower, as she is called, has been victimised for bringing these facts to light, but if I'd been her, this devil child would be at least severely impaired, and it would be more than his name missing. The school is doing nothing, which is disgraceful, but I suppose his daddy is foreign and very rich, or perhaps a peer of the realm, but I doubt it. His name should be released. He's 15 and was also able to make flamethrowers out of paint canisters on a school trip to Edinburgh. Sounds very foreign, doesn't it? I wonder, an Osama transmutation? Good luck, Gove, even though you are a Conservative. And finally, a Scottish brewery has produced a not-for-gays beer named Hello, My Name is Vladimir to mock Russia's anti-gay laws. There is no shortage of official memorabilia for the Sochi Olympics. Everything from ballpoint pens to t-shirts and tableware comes with codes that can be checked to make sure they are the genuine article. One thing you couldn't buy, however, is a beer bearing the Russian president's name and poking fun at Russia's anti-gay propaganda law. Until now, that is. Hello, My Name is Vladimir is the latest offering from Aberdeen-based novelty beer company Brewdog, and it was brewed up not so much as a tribute to the Russian president as to mock Russia's anti-gay laws in the run-up to the Sochi Winter Olympics. Vladimir Putin himself may soon be taking receipt of a shipment after the company posted a case to the Kremlin. The label of the 8.8% brew, launched on Tuesday with the Twitter hashtag #NotForGays, features bright pink Andy Warhol style prints of Mr Putin's face. Brewdog, whose past stunts have included brewing an X% beer, calling it our first foray into controversy with a cause greater than our own. I am a beer for uber hetero men who ride horses while topless and carrying knives. I am a beer to mark the 2000 Winter Olympics, but I'm not for gays, the company said in a promotional material. This presenter says, I'm a fan of Putin, and his correct words were homosexuals could come to the games, excuse the wording, but they were to stay away from children, and this is quite right. Of course, never thought of the Scots as particularly pro-gay, but I suppose money is money and publicity is publicity, but I fear it's missing the point entirely. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I wish you all a very good night. Rat fur found in Chinese-made cashmere coats. Austin Davis, who talks about the origins of insurance. Australia has hot new fleet of bright orange lifeboats. Australia turn-back policy will stop the boats, says People Smuggler. Report, more than 75,000 foreign nationals fight in Syria. China's banks could trigger global meltdown. Thought for the day, hatched and catched. And finally, anti-gay beer for Putin courtesy of the Scots. UK News. A couple who trafficked a deaf girl from Pakistan and forced her to work as a servant have sentences increased. Ilyas Ashar, 84, and Talat Ashar, 68, kept the girl, believed to be aged between 10 and 12, when she came to Britain in 2000, in a cellar in their Salford home, where she was forced to do unpaid work as well as cook and clean.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday, 5th of February 2014. Couple who trafficked deaf girl from Pakistan and forced her to work as servant have sentences increased. Royal Navy saves lives of 6 French fishermen. Benefits cheats living abroad claim millions for dead relatives as part of £84 million scam, new figures reveal. Greek deposits of €60 billion in Switzerland. Hollande gives up on controversial family law. Italy bring their so-called culture with them. Royal Navy saves lives of 6 French fishermen. French and British seamen have shown little love for each other over the years, but at the weekend the British Royal Navy showed differences can be put aside when it saved the lives of 6 Breton sailors who were trapped in a sinking trawler in stormy seas. World at 8, trawling in our seas, I presume. Benefits cheats living abroad claim millions for dead relatives as part of £84 million scam, new figures revealed. Benefit fraud committed abroad cost the taxpayer an estimated £84 million in 2012-2013, a rise of 90% in the last 2 years, new figures suggest. According to the Department for Work and Pensions, abroad fraud is now the third largest type of fraud, with investigators looking into 7,296 cases of suspected fraud abroad in 2013. Pension credit made up the majority of the fraudulently claimed money at £52 million, while £19 million was claimed for housing benefit and a further £12 million claimed for income support. Investigators have suggested a number of those investigated had been receiving the benefits from Britain for family members who had died. The government is planning to increase the use of life certificates this year to stop fraudsters continuing to claim benefits where the claimant has died. European news. Greek deposits of €60 billion in Switzerland. The deposits of Greek citizens in Swiss banks amount to €60 billion, as Greek Reporter website writes, quoting the economist Gabriel Zucman. The French professor of the London School of Economics and researcher at a University of California, Berkeley, for the couple. She was also subjected to nearly a decade of sexual abuse at the hands of Lynnes Simple. He was found guilty of trafficking the orphan youngster from Pakistan and repeatedly raping her and was jailed for 13 years. His wife, Talat Asha, 68, was found guilty of trafficking and jailed for 5 years. Today, Iliad and Talat Asha have had their jail terms raised to 15 and 6 years respectively. The couple of Cromwell Road, Eccles, were also convicted of benefit fraud relating to the girl who couldn't speak when she arrived in from Lahore. The pair denied the offences but were found guilty after a retrial in which the victim gave evidence using the sign language she had been taught after her life of servitude was discovered. World date. Along with the benefit fraud, this is just the tip of the iceberg in these communities. They